Alright, so if we go into leg lift, see how quickly you are. You're just loading right into your quad. You can see your femur internally rotating.
Yep.
So like right out of your leg lift, you push right into your knee and sit into your femur and your hip. It's still neutral, but you know that knee's starting to go inside that ankle and hip. So it just keeps turning down. So you know, you can call it a collapsing. I would call that a collapsing drive leg. Okay. And then you hit front foot. I mean, you do stay separated. I mean, you keep your shoulders back. You know, when you go early in with your hip or your femur rotation, you can stay separated. So I mean, when we get to front foot right here, you can see your hips and shoulders are separated. But when we look at the kinematic sequence, let's look at how well did they peak separate from each other. So the red, just like the lines on the body, the red is the hip and the green is the trunk. So your hip's peaking here and your trunk's peaking later. So we're showing separation there, but notice how your hip comes to peak and then it just stalls out. Notice the hump of your hip and then the hump of your trunk. That's a more like that's a peaking trunk or a trunk that's moving quickly. It's starting to move quickly. So your hip goes and just staggers. So that's the problem, is your back leg's collapsing and then your front leg lands and then it just kind of slowly pushes your hip through. We need to get that same peak in the hip and then in the trunk. So you can't let that collapse like that. You're going to have to hold that in torsion and drive it late, just like you're driving your trunk late. So you drive your trunk late and you get it. You know, if we look though at the linear aspects of this, if we go linear, so what we were looking here was in rotation. Okay, so it's angular. So now we're looking at linear. So notice how the hip peak is way lower than it was in rotation. So it's barely pushing forward. It's coming around, it's just barely pushing forward. Your trunk, and then your trunk starts to push forward, but notice where it's coming out of peak going forward right here, all the way out here where it really starts to open up, it's dying off. And you can see you're releasing vertical. So if we can delay rotation, push the hip more forward, then can we keep pushing the trunk more forward? And then we get in that more forward position, we even get the front leg extending. So once that leg collapses, you can spin, you're not going to be able to create all that linear power unless your front leg kicks in and helps out. So you just need to really hold torsion longer, sit, ride, abduct, and then drive in power and launch your trunk and just get more of that linear power going through your body.